Welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast, the show by fans for fans of your Milwaukee Brewers. Hello, Brewer fans, and welcome to another Brew Crew Review Podcast. Joining me tonight is Scott Bartel. Scott, how are you doing?
Doing great. Pitchers and catchers are here. We're getting closer.
That's one of my favorite phrases in the English language, pitchers and catchers. Love that day. Spring is getting nearer, and baseball is almost back. So I can stop staring out the window like I've been doing since World Series ended. So pretty exciting. And also this time of year happens to be what I call prospecting season. And what that pretty much means is a lot of the well-renowned publications across, the internet nowadays, but some reputable sources like Baseball America releases usually their top 100 prospects in baseball, and other tons of prospect sites out there now. A lot of them really get into that now. And also, of course, fantasy baseball drafts are happening this time of year where people are picking prospects in their dynasty leagues and all that good stuff. So it's usually an exciting time for people looking at their farm systems. Looking at the Brewers farm system this year, not quite as exciting as it's been since, the inception of the Brewer Review so many years ago, where the Brewers, got to pick in the top half of the draft because of how bad they were, and pick good players, like Ryan Braun, like Prince Fielder, like Ricky Weeks. And so those days are kind of luckily gone because we've been making the playoffs the last couple of years. But unfortunately, what that means is we currently, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, we currently have the worst worst farm system in Major League Baseball out of all 30 teams, and that's pretty much a consensus.
Wow.
So we were the only team not to have a single prospect in the top 100.
So as far as impact
prospects, that was released
players
by Baseball America and also by MLB.com. So, and I also read somewhere that out of our top prospects, 2 of them landed in most people's top 200, which would be Bryce Trang and Tristan Lutz. So, anyway, I guess what's your initial thoughts before we go over our top 30 future Brewers on the state of the Brewers farm system?
Well, to be honest, after Valentine's Day, I did a little bit of soul searching and kind of looked through my own prospect list. And let's just say my farm system is about as bad as the Brewers. So, misery loves company. But, hey, like you said, this is a Brewers team that, isn't losing 100 games or anything like that. When we started this show, we had so much to talk about with respect to prospects because the Major League team was so bad. And so, like you said, at least now, like we've had some success making the playoffs and whatnot, and so yeah, we'll see how it goes. I guess it's if you have to pick one or the other, you want to be successful at the big league level. But for a small market, don't you kind of have to have a really good farm system to thrive?
That is correct, Scott. So that part of it's a little bit bleak. However, I guess I'll start by saying people looking on the sunny side of things here is the fact that the Brewers did have one of the best prospects all in baseball graduate to the Major League level last year and will be a starter and a potential cleanup hitter for the Brewers going forward and a franchise level player, we all hope, and that's Keston Hiura. So since he got off the list, it really it's always good to graduate players in the major leagues and, obviously start contributing. That's the whole goal. So, but that being said, it's kind of a good thing. But with him leaving the list, really, some of these guys really had disappointing minor league seasons last year, and a lot of the guys just didn't come to fruition. But without further ado, let's go over the list, and we'll go over some individual players and talk about specifically, to interest of these listeners, probably players that could contribute in the 2020 season, and we'll talk about ones that will contribute down the line too. But without further ado, let's go ahead and go through the list.
All right, let's do it.
This was put together by, of course, our longtime minor league analyst, Brandon Miller. Happens also to be my brother. But here we go. Top 30 future Brewers. We're going to go in reverse order. And in previous years, I think we listed what level of the minor leagues that they were currently playing at. To this version of the list, I'm going to go ahead and throw out their age since we're sitting here in the off season, so you have some idea, how old these players are and how far away they are from contributing. So,
Oh, that's good.
all right, number 30, outfielder Tyrone Taylor. He's 26 years old. At number 29, we've got right-handed pitcher Bobby Wall. He's 27. 28, we have outfielder Luis Mendina. He's only 16 years old.
Wow.
27 on the list, we've got outfielder Micah Bello. He's 20. Number 26, we've got right-handed pitcher Dylan File. He's 25. 25 on the list, we've got first baseman Chad McClanahan. He's 22. Number 24 on the list, we've got third baseman Lucic Earsig. He's number 25. Number 23, left-handed pitcher Clayton Andrews. He's 23. Number 22 on the list, right-handed pitcher Devin Williams. He's 24. 21st player on the list, we've got right-handed pitcher Phil Bickford. He's 24. Number 20 on the list, we've got right-handed pitcher Ray Blank, who's 29 years old. Number 19 on the list, right-handed pitcher Caden Lemons. He's 21. 18 on the list, we've got outfielder Carlos Rodriguez. He's 20. Number 17 on the list, we've got catcher Jacob Nottingham. He's 24. Number 16 on the list, we've got outfielder Thomas Dillard. He's 22. 15th on the list, we've got catcher Peyton Henry, number 23. Number 14 on the list, right-handed pitcher Max Lazar. He's 20. Number 13 on the list, right-handed pitcher Trey Supak, 23. Number 12 on the list, we've got outfielder Joe Gray. He's 20 years old. Number 11 on the list, we've got right-handed pitcher Zach Brown. He's 25 years old. All right, here we are up to the top 10 future Brewers.
Here we go.
Number 10 on the list, catcher Mariano Feliciano, 21. Number 9 on the list, shortstop Eduardo Garcia. He's only 17. Number 8 on the list, left-handed pitcher Antoine Kelly. Now, he's only 20 years old. I actually believe it might be pronounced Antony Kelly. He's 20 years old. Number 7 on the list, outfielder Corey Ray. He's 26 years old. Number 6 on the list, left-handed pitcher Aaron Ashby, 21 years old. Number 5 on the list, right-handed pitcher Drew Rasmussen. He's 24 years old. Number 4, outfielder Hedbert Perez. He's only 16 years old. Number 3 on the list, we've got outfielder Tristan Lutz, who's 21. Number 2 on the list, shortstop Bryce Trang, 20 years old. And the Brew Review number 1 future Brewer for 2020 is left-handed pitcher Ethan Small, who's 22 years old.
All right.
So, there you have it. Are there any surprises on the list? I'll start by saying Brandon's got Ethan Small, number 1 overall. Most other publications and experts around seem to have a consensus of Bryce Trang being our number 1 prospect, who Brandon has number 2. And Ethan Small on most lists falls in the 3 or 4 range, but Brandon thinks he's going to be the number 1 future Brewer, and I tend to agree with him. So, what are your thoughts on the overall list? Any surprises? Anything like that, Scott?
Well, I guess other than what you just kind of clarified at the top between 1 and 2, I don't know. I guess Drew Rasmussen, I guess I thought he might be up another notch or 2, and then I kind of felt like maybe maybe Zach Brown would be up just a little bit higher, but I totally understand why he's paying the price because of very poor year last year. It's the only way to put it, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whose stock do you think has fallen the kind of the furthest in the last season?
Oh, good question. Well, unfortunately, I'll pinpoint 3 guys that came into last year's list, probably all in the top 10 of the last year, who all fallen quite a bit by having terrible seasons last year. We'll start with Corey Ray, who we've got 7 still on our list, still because I think he still has some promise, but he had a pretty terrible and injury-riddled season last year. Hopefully just give him a mulligan on that, but at his age now, it's time to put up or shut up. The other player, like you mentioned, Zach Brown, and another guy I'll point out is Lucic Irsig, who Brandon's got all the way down to 24th on the list. He was in most top 10 lists for the Brewers last year, which is too bad because the Brewers seem to have quite the opening at third base, or an opportunity, I should say, possibly for some young person like him to step up, but he did not do that last year. And I guess according to our ranking, he really doesn't profile as a future regular in the major leagues anymore. So,
yeah, there's a couple names in here that I'm definitely I definitely hope that they were going to wind up being contributors this year, and the ones that I am looking at, I'm a little surprised that maybe they're as low as they are, and that kind of makes me want to reevaluate my expectations for if they do contribute, how much they're going to be able to contribute. But let's talk about a couple of those. Let's just look at so just kind of starting at the bottom and working our way up here. So Bobby Wall, I kind of hoped was going to be able to be a part of the bullpen at some point this year. I don't know. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, he was acquired in the Keon Broxton deal from the Mets. He was formerly originally drafted by the A's. He was highly regarded coming out of college as someone who could be a future closer. He's had kind of an up and down, injury-riddled minor league career, and he's been traded several times. All that being said, he still has the same arm as when he was, highly regarded. So I still think he can have that potential, but more realistically, probably slot somewhere in the back end of a bullpen. But, having those arms come up through your system is still fairly valuable, so you don't have to, go out and spend money on them. So I would see he would be someone who would contribute this year, I would say for sure, especially for, depth. He may not make the roster out of spring, but you never know. And another similar player that we acquired via trade, moving up the list that we have listed as 20, and that'd be Ray Black, who of course was acquired in the not so infamous, but the Mauricio Dubon trade. Him along with Drew Pomeranz, who pitched phenomenally for us down the stretch and helped us get to the playoffs. Ray Black was kind of the prospect that was thrown in, and he's very similar to Wall, where he's also had an up and down minor league career that also struck out tons of players in his minor league career. His strikeout rate was just ridiculous. So he profiles as a back of the rotation arm too, but again, like a lot of these guys that throw so hard and strike, players out, his control is lacking. But both those names I think are similar contributors. I expect, more out of Ray Black, and that's probably why Brandon has him listed a little higher. In my mind, he is kind of like a Corey Knebel starter pack, so to speak, where if all things break right, he could be a future closer in my mind still. But more likely, like I said, probably like a setup guy. But, you never know. So, also could flame out like Jacob Barnes did or something too. So, and he's now a member of the Angels, by the way. But, yeah, you just never know. But, he's a quality arm, a couple of pitches, and knows how to strike out players. But really, yeah, I would think both those guys would contribute for the 2020 Brewers, almost for sure. And there's not too many other guys really on the list that I would say will. One of the guys that I think could be a surprise, sneaky contributor to the Brewers this year is number 5 overall ranked Drew Rasmussen. This is a player that was originally drafted in the first round, I believe, by the Rays, I think in 2016 or 17, and he did not sign with them, went back to school for his senior year, and then unfortunately blew out his arm. The Brewers were able to draft him the next draft in like the 5th round, and he throws about 99 miles an hour, and really, because of his late development and his injury, I think the Brewers, they have had him starting, but to me, profiles probably is similar to the other guys, but possibly with a higher upside as a back of the bullpen arm. I still hold out some hope that if they leave him in the rotation, that he could have the upside of a number 2 or 3 starter even. And so given the fact that he's already 24, I don't think he's going to need that much more time in the minor leagues, even though he's got, a little bit lack of experience there. But he's a name I'm pretty excited about, and I think he could be a surprise bullpen contributor, possibly even back of rotation contributor at the end of this year for the Brewers. We'll see.
So between Rasmussen and Ray Black, obviously Rasmussen's a lot higher, and he may very well be a part of that Brewer bullpen this year. Now, also Ray Black, he has a chance of actually breaking into the bullpen potentially right out of camp, right?
I think almost certainly. I mean, I don't know where he'll fly in the bullpen, but I would give him way over 50-50 odds that he'll break camp with the Milwaukee Brewers. So, but he does have options remaining, and it all kind of depends on what the Brewers want to go into the season with. But of course, remind Brewer fans that this year they have started a few new rules. One of them being the 26-man roster as opposed to the 25-man roster. So, with that being said, I guess it's capped at you can still only have 13 pitchers at the roster at any one time. So we'll see. I think he'll definitely throw some innings in the Brewers bullpen this year, hopefully some high leverage ones. And we'll see what we have, I think, at the major league level in Ray Black this year, for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely exciting. I mean, that's potentially 2 pitchers right there that could both potentially hit 100 on the gun, which, obviously – anytime you throw that hard, you're probably going to have some control issues, but definitely exciting that we'll have those kind of power arms potentially in the pen. I did also want to mention, having the depth this year, especially with pitchers with options where, obviously in the last couple of years, the Brewers have done a really good job of shuttling people back and forth to keep, basically fresh arms available. Because, obviously we do use our bullpen quite a bit. Having said that, basically in the last year, teams like the Dodgers have been able to kind of stash people, toss them on the DL for 10 days. That's no longer an option, right?
Yeah, I believe that's correct. There's a change in the rules with that too. So
yeah, I think they bumped it out to 15 days now. So just because it was like people were kind of taking advantage of it. Like people were just coming up with like phantom injuries, I guess, just as a reason to kind of have somebody available and just kind of shuttle them back and forth that way. Whereas the Brewers are doing it the more legit way. And that's why, whenever Stearns talks about, especially pitching, but he's always talked about having controllable talent. I think that's obviously this is one of many reasons why.
Yep. Let's also throw out a couple names on here. There's not too many position players that will probably have a 2020 impact on the Milwaukee Brewers on this list, but just to throw out some that could. I would say Corey Ray is an outfielder. Also catcher Jacob Nottingham. The problem with both those, and also let's throw out number 30 on the list, outfielder Tyrone Taylor, who would be a really nice 4th or 5th outfielder. But we don't really need him because we brought back in Keon Broxton, if we stick with him. We also don't really need a catcher, a backup catcher in Jacob Nottingham, because we've got Pena as a backup with Navarre as a starter, so he's kind of there for injury depth or whatnot. And then Corey Ray, again, we brought in Sal Garcia to play the corner outfielder, which bumped Braun to part-time duty at first base and outfield. And really, there's no room for Corey Ray, given this would be an injury. However, I think Corey Ray in particular is someone that could, in my opinion, have a Trent Grisham-like breakthrough of a year. And if he does, maybe he won't contribute as a Milwaukee Brewer, but he could make himself a valuable trade chip by the July trading season, trade deadline, so to speak. So that's the hope, at least, because I mean, he's already going to be 26 this season. It's hard for me. I mean, he needs to, it's put up or shut up time for Corey Ray, or else he's going to, not have a baseball career, basically. A Major League Baseball career, I should say. I think, and some of the other guys that throw out there that did have disappointing years, like we mentioned, Zach Brown, I think he has the ability to bounce back. Unfortunately, same thing. Luce Earsig will be a third baseman. Now we'll go to AAA, and the AAA hitting environments last year were kind of ridiculous. So he could put up good numbers. And given the Brewers' third base situation, some people might be looking like, oh, good, hopefully he'll be ready. Well, I just don't think he's any better than the guys we brought on even. So we'll see. But overall, kind of getting back toward the top of the list, specifically, I'll just talk about some of the guys in the top 10. Our supplemental first round pick last year, our comp round pick, I guess it's officially called, was Anthony Kelly. He's a big left-handed. He's like a 6'6" left-hander who throws 100 miles an hour, and he's like he's turned 20 now this season, and he was 19 when he drafted him, and he's definitely profiled as someone in the back of the bullpen power arm. So look for him in a couple of years, hopefully. Ethan Small was our number one draft pick overall, picked toward the end of the first round, which is Brewers took him a little bit higher than most other teams had him evaluated at. And he had a phenomenal season, albeit in a small sample last year. And he had an arm injury a couple of years ago in college. And when he came back, he actually lost some miles per hour on his fastball. However, his strikeout rate went way up because there's something about his delivery that's very, I don't want to say like Josh Hader-esque, but basically he's a left-hander who opposing batters have a real hard time picking up his fastball, which makes it play up by about 5 miles an hour more than it is. I think he throws about 91, 92 miles an hour. So, and his secondaries are pretty good. So I really feel like he's going to be a sneaky good middle rotation arm with a possible upside of like a number 2 starter. That's what I think Brandon has on top of this list. Number 2 overall, Bryce Trang was, of course, our number 1 pick from a couple of years back. He's a shortstop. Again, his hit tool is pretty nice, but his lack of power and kind of just middling speed kind of profiles him as potential MLB regular, but I'd say along the lines of a 270 to 280 hitter with like 10 to 15 home run power and about, same thing, 10 to 20 steal potential. Not a bad player. Pretty good batting eye, but again, nothing to write home about.
Do you think he has do you think he has the ability to stick at short, or?
Yeah, I do believe, a lot of these people drafted, it's a good point, at shortstop seem to like get moved around, but I think Bryce Trang can definitely, stick at short, which is pretty valuable. He also, of course, would slot in fine as a second baseman, but he definitely seems like someone who could stick at short for sure.
Awesome.
Defensively. And then our number 3 on the list, Tristan Lutz, he's also a second-round pick from a couple of years back out of high school. He's got a huge power bat, but again, same thing that plagues a lot of young hitters, huge swing and miss to his game. And, he has a decent batting eye, but not a walk machine by any means. So he probably, one of those corner outfield types of power. I guess the guy that's 2 of my favorites on the list are actually number 4, Hedbert Perez, who's the son of the former major leaguer Robert Perez. And he was just signed as a 16-year-old this past July. And people are really thinking that he's got a huge ceiling, possibly the highest ceiling in the system. But those guys are so far away from the majors, it's hard to get too excited about them until they show some, full seasons here in the minors. So you'll probably hear his name more in the next year or 2. One of my other favorites in the top 10 is actually left-handed pitcher Aaron Ashby, who's 21. I think he's going to be at least a 4 or 5 starter, probably within a year or 2, helping out the Brewers. And he's got one of the best hammer curveballs in all the majors, and coming from the left-hand side, it's kind of exciting. So, and he's also the nephew of former major leaguer. I think it's Andy Ashby. Yeah, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
So anyway, more bloodlines there. So anyway, overall, not too much to get super excited about, just because there's no one, no blue chippers help us out the next year or 2 necessarily. But there'll be some guys that contribute, and hopefully there's some sneaky good players like Trent Grisham last year, who, if nothing else, brought us a player like Luis Urias via trade. And to me, Luis Urias is like the middle of our infield with Luis Urias and Keston Hira. I think that's really solidifies our up the middle for a number of years, in my opinion, and I think that's pretty valuable to the MLB team.
Yeah, I think the only thing people are worried about is that if Hira is going to be able to stick at second base, but I really want him to, and I think the Brewers are going to give him every opportunity to, because obviously he'll lose a good amount of value. If he has to like transition to the outfield or something like that. But I mean, could you imagine like if Braun stuck at third, like back in his heyday, like that would have been phenomenal, but it just wasn't going to happen. So ultimately, though, that bat sure plays, and so we're going to find a spot for him no matter what.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about Hero. Like, he should have a bat that plays pretty much anywhere. But yeah, like you said, I think the Brewers are committed to keeping him at second base going forward. But we never know. There's whispers that there could be the DH coming to NL in a couple of years, so we'll see. So hopefully, a lot of these guys had down seasons last year. Hopefully, there's some bounce back. Like a guy like Zach Brown can shoot back in the top 10 or possibly be a contributor in by the end of the season. But we'll see. The Brewers have quite a few young players that are actually at the major league level, and I've contributed for the last couple of years. So it's still an exciting time to be a Brewer fan. I think this upcoming draft this June will be important for the Brewers to help restock the farm system a little bit more, and hopefully that department does a good job going forward. Because the Brewers, again, we're picking towards the back of the first round, but I think it's really important that we continue to draft and develop as a small market team, and also that some of these international signings of these 16-year-olds start to actually pan out. They have actually had some high-profile guys the last couple of years that have just not really panned out. I think the biggest one a couple of years ago, I think we gave a $3 million signing bonus to a 16-year-old. I believe his name was Gilbert Lara. He actually ended up being traded to the Nationals as a part of the what player did we get from the Nationals? Was it Gio Gonzalez? I don't remember. Anyway,
right.
He got traded, and he's just not going to pan out. And there's been several other ones like him. I think Warrior Ernesto is another guy whose name was on this list last year. Now he's off it. But again, some of these kids are still only 17, 18 years old, so you never know. But they're definitely a lot of risk involved with that. Very low floor, so to speak, even though their ceilings supposedly are really high. But we'll see.
A couple of the older names that we've talked about in years past. Jacob Nottingham. I mean, at this point, I'm not sure that he'll ever be considered a major league talent. I guess at this point, he really hasn't shown anything, which is kind of disappointing too, because he was he was in that Chris Davis trade, and I was really hoping that. I mean, originally when we traded for him, we said that he was going to be like the catcher of the future. He was going to take Lucroy's place, and now it seems like Lucroy's been gone forever, and we still we had to look at all these other options, and we're still waiting on Jacob Nottingham to come around. So I don't know what to think there, I guess.
Well, I mean, that's just the way it goes. I mean, what it comes down to is there's only so many jobs at MLB level, and that's why there's always these lists of prospects. That's why Baseball America traditionally the top 10 prospects per team, because those are usually the only guys that actually sniff and actually become major league regulars. Now there's sites with lists of up to 50 players per team, and a lot of these guys, there can never once be someone from way down the list that makes the majors and contributes and even becomes a regular. But for the most part, there's a lot of attrition rates, and a lot of these guys have a similar career path to what Jake and I am seeing, where there was a small period of time where he had an opportunity to see the role. And now, a couple of years later, since that's some off-season in the minor leagues, he's already got a couple of guys ahead of him in the pecking order here in this organization. So unless he gets traded or there's a major injury or something like that, he's really not going to get probably another opportunity, and therefore could be a career minor leaguer or get bounced to another team. Or once he's he's off the 40-man roster, he'll have to start finding what team the catcher depth, and so to speak, and it kind of will be a journeyman catcher until he can but I think his promise of what he could have been is at the major league level is kind of panned out a little bit, unfortunately. And it all kind of stems from, like, I think he had one really awesome season as an Astros prospect before they traded him to the A's, and then the A's next season after that traded him to the Brewers in that Chris Davis trade you mentioned, and he never really lived up to that billing. And some of these things are kind of, it's hard to gauge because some of these minor league ballparks and environments really are more conducive to offense than others.
Yeah.
And therefore, sometimes these guys have these breakout seasons that just look phenomenal. And then you find out the next season when they go to a more neutral hitting environment that they're back to just being an average prospect, and it's kind of all smoke and mirrors, so to speak. I remember a prospect about like 10 years ago the Angels had named Brandon Wood, who had this phenomenal year in this hitting environment at like the A level, and everyone was jacked up about him. He never really made it in majors. So, I mean, this happens quite often, but just the bottom line is just there's so many players vying for so few Major League Baseball spots. Well, the good news for these players is there's one extra spot to be gained and across baseball. 30 extra players will be on rosters this year than previous years, so that's kind of exciting. The unexciting part of this new rule is come September, rosters will not be expanded to 40. They're only going up to 28, from 26 to 28. So that really sucks for a lot of these guys because some of them, sometimes it's their only shot to actually say, hey, I was a major leaguer by having a cup of coffee in that September expansion roster or roster expansion phase in the past, and kind of disappointing that some of those guys probably won't get that same cup of coffee, so to speak, to show what they can do, or even just to say that they made the bigs. So it's kind of disappointing, but
yeah. And I guess the other thing is too with that, like, I don't know if this is something that's going to help prevent tanking or if it's actually going to promote tanking. Like, I'm not sure which way it'll go yet, but like if I were a team and I had, veterans that, let's say, didn't have much value, like, you're going to throw them all on waivers and basically trade them or just let them go basically for next to anything, which I realize happens a good amount of the time anyway, but now you might even be even more incentivized to do that. If it means freeing up a spot just so that you can get a better look at some of your minor leaguers, So I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of rules actually that have been coming across that I'm not a fan of, and this is definitely one of them because I know that, like, maybe the casual fan doesn't want to attend a game or listen to a game where you don't know half the starting lineup. And it's a team that you followed fairly regularly. I get that part of it, but at the same time, it's really important to find out like what you have in a lot of these players. And the last thing I want is for people to give up on players, because not only because this is obviously a really important sport and team and everything, but these are people's dreams at stake too. So there's a lot of minor leaguers where that we've interviewed, in fact, on this show, that have said so much as like, I was basically like a career minor leaguer, but I did come up and get that cup of coffee. Do not regret any of it. It was the greatest feeling ever. And to, deprive somebody who maybe worked like, 10 years of their life to try to get to that moment and not get that moment, that's, that's obviously just horrible.
No, I absolutely 100% agree with everything you said, and it's disappointing, and I don't know really the reasoning behind it, but yeah, it is what it is, I guess. But and as far as complaining or talking about the other, I should say, discussing the other potential rule or actual rule changes going on around baseball, we'll probably have to leave that for another podcast because we'll definitely digress into that. But anyway, the bottom line is, and I'm sure Vince has, and Chad also has some opinion on that, so let's probably wait for those. But no, I mean, the bottom line, the Brewers don't have the best farm system in baseball. In fact, they have the worst coming into this year. But part of that really is the fact that they don't have very much of those blue chippers at the top of their rankings ready to contribute. And overall, I feel the depth is fairly decent for the Brewers minor leagues. And again, I think some will have some surprise guys that they've drafted the last couple of years that can emerge. And be on this list next year. And some of these guys, of course, fall off, but that's kind of the nature of it. It's like, all these guys applying for a couple of jobs, and they have to beat out everyone else. It's kind of like, competition, and there's a lot riding on this stuff. But it'll be exciting to see some of these guys actually suit up with the Milwaukee Brewers uniforms for the first time. And yeah, I think some of these guys will contribute this year, and we'll see. Like I said, I'm kind of excited about some of the bullpen guys like Bobby Wall and Ray Black. We might see right from day one, so we'll see.
Yeah, it should be exciting. We might have to do a little mini Brew Review road trip to spring training this year and do a little bit of scouting for all of our fans potentially.
That is a really cool thing about spring training, especially the first couple of weeks of spring training. The Brewers do give major league invites to a lot of these players that are at different various levels of the minors to come up and actually play against the major leaguers for the first couple of weeks of spring training, and then they get sent down. And they still stick around in the complex and usually to the minor league field and play and stuff like that. But then the Brewers start to get most of their veterans or their opening day roster set as the middle of spring hits. But those first couple of weeks of spring training are specifically exciting for me to watch and to check the box scores on, because these are some of the players that are getting a rare opportunity to play alongside some of the big leaguers that they possibly idolize, like the Ryan Brauns and whatnot on rosters. And to be able to do that, it's kind of exciting for a young player, and definitely a cool part of spring training, no doubt.
Yeah, and not only that, but there's always one person that they're kind of a fringe. Maybe they'll make the team, but probably won't. That kind of thing, and they just come into spring training and just absolutely rake. And then all of a sudden you think, hey, we can't get rid of this guy, right? I mean, we had that with most recently, I guess, with Jesus Aguirre and Ji-Man Choi. Both had years like that, or spring trainings like that, and then want to basically make it a team. And it's always good to get those stories out of spring training. I mean, it's just there's seemingly one every year, and I just can't wait to see who it's going to be this year. Yeah,
I do remember that. When the date that the 2018 opening day roster was announced, and there was 4 first basemen on it for the Brewers, who has an NL team with no DH spot, was kind of surprising.
Mm-hmm.
But it turned out to be a wise move and a good talent evaluation for the time, because later on that same year, I remember being at Game 6 of the NLCS, and Jesus Aguilar had a huge couple of hits to put us to Game 7 on the brink of the World Series. So those spring training games are huge, and he went from possibly probably not making the team, having a monster spring, to making it all the way that deep in the playoffs as a member of the Milwaukee Brewers. So I mean, it's definitely an exciting time to spring training around baseball, and yeah, definitely. So I know, Scott, you only live about a 4-hour drive from the Cactus League teams, and the cool thing about that is all the Cactus League teams are probably within a hour or so radius, maybe an hour and a half radius of each other once you get down there to Phoenix. So you should definitely head on down there. The Brewers, of course, still train in Maryvale, and they've made improvements to their complex this year, supposedly, to the whatever it is, AmFam Fields of Phoenix or whatever. So you should definitely go down there and check it out if you hopefully get the chance.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe some sort of a trip with you, me, and Vince, Chad, Brandon too. I mean, he's obviously a huge contributor to this as well. Almost as much as Chad. So I mean, it would be great to see any of them.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely. Hopefully, we can fit that all in the budget for us to get that together down there. But if not, we could at least scrape enough change out of our car floors to get you guys some money so you can go on down there, Scott, and do some reporting for us. So awesome. So so that pretty much wraps up our top 30 for future Brewers podcast for this year. We'll probably post a list on Twitter too for you to look at sometime tomorrow. So so thanks for tuning in. Anything else, Scott?
Stay classy and go Brewers.
Go Brew. Happy spring training.
Da-na-na-na.
All right. That was like 45 fucking minutes, or at least 40 probably.
God damn it!
Oh, that's fine.
Oh, yeah, that's good then.